Hello, my name is Pascal Bory, and in this presentation I would like to give you some tips and tricks when preparing your project proposal for the ethics review, whether it is through the Research Ethics Committee or the OBC. So a few important elements when you prepare such a presentation. It's very important to truly understand the goal of your study and the setting and the framework of your research. So therefore it's important to describe the scientific background and reasons to do this study, the added value of doing your research, and the clear objectives that you want to achieve with your study. Explain the methods that you will use and the ethical implications of some of those methods, and describe clearly the recruitment, which patients, which persons, healthy volunteers will be included in your study. Why did you choose this group? If you're doing an analysis of patient data, explain why you included this group of patients. A few elements when further on. If you include participants in a prospective study, it's important to inform people about their participation. And an information letter will be crucial for that goal. In such an information letter, there are different elements that should be explained. Who you are, what you're doing, what the goal is of your study, how your study has been designed, what your expectations are towards the research participants, what are potential advantages and disadvantages are of participation, and emphasizing that participation is always voluntary. Participants are free to decide to participate and as well free to withdraw at any moment. It should be clear what will be done with the data that you collect, with the samples that you might collect. And it should be clear if there is any compensation for participation in the study. It should as well be clear if insurance has been taken for that study. Information letters should be written in a very accessible way and should be understandable to research participants. Research participants are not experts, and therefore information should be very clear to them. Participants should always have the possibility to ask questions and should have as well the option to withdraw at any moment when participating in the study. It's very important as well to include in your information letter the contact details of the supervisor and not only have the students that do the study named in this information letter. Next, so besides the information letter, there is as well the need for a written informed consent, and certainly for studies that fall under the Human Experimentation Law, there is the need and obligation, legal obligation, to have a written consent. An information letter must contain the contact details of the promoter, as I said earlier, and the informed consent form should as well have the space for the signature of the researcher and the research participants. You should as well provide this information letter and a copy of that together with the informed consent form to the research participant. A few important elements as well. If you are doing a retrospective study, for example, you want to analyze patient files and you are analyzing those patient files, it's impossible in this context to recontact patients because this would not be considered a retrospective studies. If you start calling patients, it is considered to be a prospective study. This means that a written informed consent will be necessary in those cases. If in the case of your master dissertations you want to analyze a case, a clinical case, please be aware that the written informed consent of that patient will always be necessary. On our website, you can find an example of such a written informed consent form that you can use and adapt in function of your study. Please make clear in your project application how the privacy and the confidentiality of your research participants will be protected. We have in the explanation that is on our website some examples of text that you can include in such a proposal. Please make use of those in order not to get critique on that part of your application. In every application, there is a specific part which is obligatory in every application, which is a declaration of confidentiality and careful handling of personal data. As you are working with personal data of individuals, it's very important to ensure that the privacy of your research participants is being protected. Working with data, and for example in the context of working with patients' data, it's really important only to work with the data that you need. There is no need to collect more data that have no function in your study. So process only the necessary data. As much as possible, work with anonymous data. Anonymous data is always preferred compared to coded data because it doesn't include specific privacy risks. Anonymize or de-identify data in order to make sure that if there would be a data leak, you can never go back to see to whom these data belonged. And in case you need to code data, make sure that your code that you are using is not leading to identification or partial identification of the person. This means don't use, for example, the EAD number, which is an administrative number that is being used in the hospital, but which is known by quite a lot of people that have access to this EAD database. Don't use in your code a name, initial, don't use a place or a date of birth. And in case you need to code, you might have a file, you will have a file where you have this connection, the key between your code and the identifier. Well, make sure that you keep this file very safely and not next to the other file. So keep it in another file on another computer. Those working with qualitative research will have audio files. Audio files can be identifying, so once your study has been finalized, make sure you destroy those audio files, write this up as well in your application. When you finalize your project, make sure that all the files that you have that contain data is being provided to your promoter that can ensure, so that he can ensure further safe storage. And in accordance with KU Leuven policies, all these files should be kept for at least 5 years. Once you have submitted a project application to the ethics committee, you might have received some feedback, some things that might be changed. Well, make sure that any change you bring in your resubmission is being done using track changes and highlights so that changes are very clear. Also, in case you are doing an amendment to a study because you changed something in your amendment, please make sure that this is done by track changes. Any question you might have about preparing a research proposal for a research ethics committee can be asked to the OBC at kuleuven.be email address, and have a look as well at our website where you can find more information about preparing an application for the research ethics committee. Good luck with your application.